Hello and welcome everyone to lesson 14 in this Chess Beginner to Winner series, in which we take you from absolute beginner to winning your first chess tournament games and beyond. All right, so today we're going to take a look at checkmates for beginners. And before I show you a bunch of different examples for that, I'm going to show you a game by Bobby Fischer, Robert James Fischer, but most people called him Bobby Fischer. He has the white pieces, and he's playing against Jose Luis Garcia Bachile. Anyway, this game was played in 1970 in a simultaneous exhibition. Bobby Fischer probably faced many opponents at the same time in this exhibition. And if I look at the game review, it looks like Bobby Fischer played 90.1% accuracy. So maybe because it was a simultaneous exhibition and he had a lot of games to play at once, maybe that affected his play. He had one miss and 3 inaccuracies, but his opponent, who played at a 69.4 level, had 4 inaccuracies and 3 mistakes. All right, so let's take a look and see. We'll just see what Bobby Fischer did here. So this game review, the computer is blasting through this. So let me go back and just take a look at the analysis. All right, Bobby Fischer plays e4 to begin the game. And Bobby Fischer was known for playing e4, and he called e4 best by test because he tested out different opening moves, and he felt that e4 was the best one to play. That led to more tactics and attacking chances. But d4 is a solid move, c4, knight to f3. There are different opening moves you can play. So his opponent responds with c5, the Sicilian defense. So if you're not familiar with this opening, instead of playing e5 to cover this d4 square, you play c5 and prevent your opponent from moving this d pawn forward, because if he does that, you capture with your less valuable pawn on the side. You trade it for a more valuable one in the center, and if the queen would recapture, then the knight would jump in here and chase the queen away. So anyway, the game continues with knight to f3. So now this d pawn can be pushed forward, and if the c-pawn captures, the knight can capture instead to prevent a queen capture that could lead to this knight chasing that queen away. All right, so e6. So making room for this bishop to develop. d4, putting both the strong pawns in the center. And this pawn is captured because usually when your opponent puts 2 of his pawns in the center, it's most of the time a good idea to knock one out, especially if you can capture it with a pawn from the side. So recapture by the knight to keep material even, and now a6. So this move, it looks like it doesn't really control the center much, but it does have purpose. By playing this, you prevent bishop checks in the future once you move this pawn. You keep the knights out of this square. So a lot of times the knight might jump here to c3, and then one of these knights could try and jump up here. So Fischer responds by just developing the other knight, protecting this pawn. Now the queen moves to this square, which is usually a decent square in the Sicilian defense for the queen to go to. A rook could line up behind the queen and put pressure down this half-open c-file. And so now we have bishop to d3 here. Developing the bishop, Fischer's ready to castle. This helps fortify the pawn. The only downside is that now the queen is not protecting this knight. So that will be something to watch out for, especially if this knight jumps to c6, attacking the knight on d4. All right, so black develops his knight here, attacking. And see, the queen is here. It can also prevent this pawn from pushing forward because now it would just capture with check. So this pawn cannot move forward and chase this knight. All right, castling by Fischer, and now b5, gaining space on the queen side, making room to develop the bishop over here to b7 and attack down through the center and towards the king. And now the rook just develops here to help protect this pawn in the center. The bishop lines up on the center and down the king side, but the computer says that's an inaccuracy, that it would have been better to just go ahead and develop the bishop here, creating a battery with the queen and threatening this h-pawn, and then also the king would be ready to castle. So Fischer responds by attacking the knight, like we mentioned earlier. Now that the rook is protecting that pawn, the queen cannot capture. And if the bishop would have been here, this pawn would not be able to move forward, or the bishop would just capture. All right, so the knight moves to the best square here. Knight to d5, attacking this knight, threatening to capture and doubled pawns, creating doubled pawns and isolated pawns, so threatening to weaken Fischer's queen side here. So now Fischer captures, the bishop captures, which is best, and now we have a4 by Fischer. And the computer prefers h4, so that's interesting, trying to grab space on the king side. And now b4. And it says this is good, but developing the knight would have been better. So Fischer plays bishop to e4, an inaccuracy, threatening to capture and double these pawns. So what does his opponent do? He captures, and now the rook captures, and the knight attacks here. So Fischer ignores that and develops his other bishop. And so now the computer says that's an inaccuracy, that it would have been better to just go ahead and capture the knight. But after rook to c8, putting more firepower on this c-file, Fischer tries to guard, but now we have the queen repositioning, putting more pressure on the knight. And then the pawn moves up to help protect, and the queen is lined up on the king. Capture. Rook captures. So now, if the knight were to capture here, white would grab this rook up here, which is unprotected. So the bishop moves in here, putting more pressure on. But now we have Fischer retreating back and helping defend and lining up on the queen. So a lot of craziness going on here. Black just castles, trying to get away from all this mess. But better would have been to retreat the knight. And this castling move is actually a mistake. And it looks like white is winning now, even though material is still even. All right, the game continues with rook capturing on c5. So that move, it still keeps white ahead, but it looks like bishop to knight to b5 would have been better. But since I want to get on to the checkmates for beginners here, I will hurry up and just go through this game so you can see how Fischer created his checkmating attack on his opponent here. So capture, now a discovered attack on the queen by this bishop, and then the queen retreats, but there's another attack here on the queen. So the knight captures, and now knight captures the rook. Instead of capturing here, which would have been the best move, the knight jumps up to here. And so now the knight escapes, and we have an attack on the queen. But Fischer ignores, well, he runs away from that. And if this knight were moving, or excuse me, if the knight moves out of the way, there's a threat here of a back rank mate. Well, the bishop is covering that, but this move with the queen would be a back rank mate. So, and we'll cover those in the description here for Checkmates for Beginners. All right, let's see what Fischer does here. Knight to f6. Instead of capturing with the rook, the king moves because he's lined up. The pawn can't capture because the king was lined up with this queen. The queen was pinning the pawn. So the king moves, and a sacrifice. Queen sacrifice, capture, but now the game ended. Let me go back here. After this sacrifice, the opponent resigned. And why did he resign? Well, because you have this capture, then rook checks, king could move out towards the center, because if he moved in the corner, that would be an immediate mate. But there's still a mate here. Check, the king tries to run, check again, and now it is just mate, because the pawn is covering this escape square and the knight covers this, and the rook and knight work together to form an interesting mate in the center here. All right, I just wanted to show you how a crazy checkmate can occur in a game. But before you try this Bobby Fischer type queen sacrifice and charging in here with a checkmate, as a beginner, you want to make sure you get down or get the basics down and learn the easiest checkmates, so you're just familiar with them and you know what chances you have to set up these checkmates or not while you're playing a game. So let's take a look here. All right, so some of the simple checkmates to watch out for would be a back rank checkmate. So something like this. Let's say your king has castled and you have a queen or a rook just lined up, and you can just move your rook up here, and this would be a back rank mate. And the reason this simple mate works is because the king has no escape square. So in this position, if one of the pawns were moved forward like this, well, now it doesn't work because you can check, but the king has an escape square. And also, sometimes the back rank mate might not be as obvious, especially if you have a rook over here guarding the back rank. Well, then you want to be careful if there are more than one of your opponent's pieces lining up on the same square on the back rank. Because now, if you wanted to be flashy, you could sacrifice a queen. Also, bringing the rook up would work as well. But either piece could move up here, delivering check. And now the only thing you can do is capture, but then the second piece moves up there and delivers a mate. So definitely something you want to watch out for anytime there are weaknesses on the back rank. Make sure that either you have an escape hatch where your king can move out, something like this, or perhaps if you have a piece that could, like a bishop, that can move back and block the attack like this. So, that's an option. Or if you think there's going to be some kind of threat to the back rank, just maybe leave a rook in here to help defend. But yes, always keep an eye out for surprise checks on the back rank here that can lead to a mate. Okay, so let's take a look. I'll clear this off and we'll look at a few other interesting checkmates. So the obvious ones, say your opponent's king is castled over here. Well, you have simple mates where you create a bishop and queen battery, and you're able to do something like this, where the queen is protected by the bishop and you just move up here and deliver a mate with the queen. And there are other interesting tactics like this. So let's say, oh, I don't know, the queen is here and your pawn has been moved forward. And so now, the king is trapped. The queen could go ahead and jump in here like this. So something to watch out for whenever your opponent has moved his pawns, like move this pawn up here and there's no bishop in here. So if there's a bishop to keep the pieces out, well then, you could have an advantage. The bishop keeps the opponent from making inroads into your position. But once they are traded, let's see here. Let's say we have this queen here, or actually the queen here. So something else to watch out for is, if your opponent, or you can do this to your opponent, exchange off that bishop for your bishop, and then you could have something like this, and then the king has to be careful here. He could try and run away, but if he's not careful and he goes into the corner, the queen can jump up here. And now if he realizes, oh, I'm stuck in the corner, well, it's too late because you have something like this. So the queen can work with all the other pieces in delivering different checkmates. That's one thing that makes the queen so powerful, and something to watch out for. So just be aware of that. Also, let's see, I'll get rid of the queen here and this pawn. Let's say you've castled here and the bishop was exchanged, but it was exchanged for something other than your opponent's bishop, and he still has his bishop. Oh, excuse me, need a white one. And he still has his bishop covering the squares here. Well, then you have to watch out if there's a knight that's able to jump up into the position here and deliver a mate. So, always keep an eye on weaknesses. The weakness created by fianchettoing a bishop, pushing this pawn and putting your bishop here. And then if that bishop is traded off, there can be a lot of possible attacks and checkmate threats here. So here the knight and the bishop work together. Another example to watch out for, we'll get rid of this rook, get rid of the knight and this pawn. So let's say this pawn has been traded away and there's a rook down here, and the rook is able to move up the h-file and deliver a check like this, protected by the bishop here. So this is another beginner checkmate to learn and to become familiar with. So you see all the threats that can be created and that could come about when there are weaknesses with these dark squares around the king side here. All right, so that's just another example of a possible checkmate. And maybe you would have to set this up with something like, oh, I don't know, even if this rook is here and the pawn is here, and then you have the queen and the other rook, you could try something like this. Capture. Well, now, what can you do here? The best thing would be probably to just move a pawn and accept the loss of this pawn. But if your opponent tries to capture here, well then you can just move here, and then once he retreats, the queen can just move up there and deliver a mate. So that's just another possibility. And you can make it more complicated. Let's say both the rooks were here, and the queen, oh, excuse me, move that off of there, and the queen was back here, and the pawns are in their original formation. And let's say there's a knight here helping protect. Well, oh, excuse me. And now you can try and sacrifice here. And so maybe the opponent would think, oh, well, I can just capture that. Of course, you could have captured the knight that was unprotected there. But capture, capture. Then the queen slides over there. And once the king retreats, once again, you have this mate. But these are just ideas to keep in mind, things you can set up on a board and try different checkmates. Especially if you try and do checkmate puzzles and problems, that can definitely help improve your chess. Let's see, what else? There is another interesting checkmate possibility. Let's put these pawns back here. Oh, get rid of that one. And get rid of the bishop. So, there's another interesting possible mate where a knight is able to jump up here. So, check, forcing the king to move over, and then the queen can sacrifice here. And now this forces the king to capture, but then if you have a rook over here, the rook can swing over and deliver a mate, because this knight is covering these escape squares on g8 and g6. So another interesting checkmate that you can keep in mind. All these checkmates, basically you want to kind of just learn all these possible checkmates or practice them in puzzles and problems. And the more you see them over and over, there's more of a possibility that it'll stick in your head when you're playing games, and you might start to see some of these possible checkmates in games that you're playing and be able to use them on your opponent, or help defend against them if your opponent's attacking you. All right, well, let's see if there's anything else I should take a look at. I'll end it there because I don't want to show you too much too fast to where you get confused. But as a review, just remember, let's see here. Let me get rid of some of these pieces. I'll just empty the board. Remember, the back rank checkmate, which occurs more often than you would think. As a beginner, I definitely lost a game or two to a back rank checkmate. So anytime your king is behind these pawns and doesn't have a way out, always be careful, because all it takes is for a rook or a queen, something to just jump up here to the back rank, and if you have nothing else protecting this back rank, the king is checkmated. So to prevent that, you could either have a rook here or something over here guarding the back rank, or you could just make an escape hatch for your king with one of the pawns, so then after check he can escape. So always keep an eye out for back rank mate possibilities to defend your king or to attack your opponent. And then just watch out for other attacking possibilities when you fianchetto a bishop by pushing this pawn forward. And normally you would have a bishop in here guarding things, but if that bishop is exchanged out of there, well, then you have weaknesses on these dark squares, and especially if your opponent has a bishop lined up through those squares, and let's say you have a rook here and you're kind of blocked in. Well, now you can have all kinds of problems, especially if there's something like this where one rook can sacrifice up here. Be careful, because now if you try to take this, well, then you're going to fall into a mate trap with this. Then once you retreat, now the rook will deliver mate backed up by this bishop. So this is very dangerous. It's probably better, instead of capturing there, when this other, where was that, down here somewhere, instead of capturing this, I don't know. Oh, hold on. What would be best here? We could load it up, and the computer won't let me load that because there was no king on the board for the other side. So you could have pushed the pawn forward to help block the path of that bishop that is causing all kinds of problems up through that diagonal. Okay, so remember to keep an eye on the back rank and avoid back rank mates. Also, keep an eye out whenever you have fianchettoed, and be very careful about giving up the bishop here whenever your king is over here, because now you have a lot of weak dark squares here, and especially if other pieces are lined up in here and they're able to swoop in and deliver a mate. So just be very careful about that. And one tricky thing, so if there's a mate threat and you're thinking, oh, well, maybe I can I don't know, bring a queen back to protect this square. Well, then you have to watch out, because there's another square that they can deliver mate from up here on h8. So, that can be tricky stuff for a beginner, but as you see it more often and become more familiar with it, you'll be able to stop these attacks and also use your opponent's weaknesses like this against them to help deliver mates. And if you can't get the checkmate, at least maybe gain some material and some type of winning advantage. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this, what was that? Lesson 14, Checkmates for Beginners. And in the future, I'll show you more tactics, more checkmates, but I'll end it there for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Feel free to leave comments or suggestions or even requests for future chess material that you would like to see and learn about. So thank you, everyone, and have a super chess day.